Night shift at the morgue. I worked as a security guard at a local hospital in the morgue area. The place often experienced break-ins by a few addicts trying to experiment with some strange chemicals stored in the lab, and eventually it became their final resting place. Everything started like a normal night shift. Hygiene plays a crucial role in the hospital. To keep the place more sanitary, they recently installed automatic sliding doors that open when someone passes by, eliminating the need to touch any door handles. Every night at exactly 3:00 a.m., the door would open for a few seconds and then close again. I believe the door was programmed with some kind of time-based trigger, but when I contacted the door installation company, they told me that was impossible since the door was designed to open only when the sensor was activated or manually operated. So, this continued without explanation for a long time and became a routine for everyone watching the door open and close on the monitor every night. Tonight, I was on shift alone because my colleague was sick, and there wasn't enough time to find a temporary replacement on such short notice. I was no stranger to danger and didn't worry about working alone at night. The security monitors showed only 2 cameras, one facing the control room and another at the far end of the hallway looking toward the morgue entrance. When the clock struck 3:00 a.m., I did what every night guard on duty would do. I started watching the screen. As usual, the door moved, but honestly, I still got chills sometimes from the sudden rush of cold air every time the door opened. Suddenly, the door remained open. I thought it was a screen glitch, but the lights on the door were still flashing. I waited a few minutes, but I soon realized I had to go down the hallway because the morgue door was strictly prohibited from being left open. As I walked down the hallway, the cold air blew against me, and I thought it would be even colder when I reached the morgue. I had hoped that the door might have closed by the time I got there, but just as I saw on the monitor, the door was indeed still open, and the camera was functioning normally. I tried waving my hand in front of the sensor, but it was useless. The door didn't budge. I reluctantly considered my next option, which was to check the sensors from the inside. As I turned around to look down the hallway, the door finally closed. I felt my hair stand on end as a strange quietness settled in a sensation like someone was standing right behind me. Out of curiosity, I went back to the monitor. I decided to rewind the security footage to the moment I approached the door to see if I could spot anything unusual. And what I saw was something I shouldn't have witnessed. There was a girl standing in front of the door behind me. I couldn't clearly see her face because of her long black hair and the white dress she was wearing. She just stood there smiling, staring at me with one eye. To this day, I still can't explain it, as I had just been there and hadn't seen anyone. It wasn't until I checked the other camera that faced the entrance to the control room that I truly shuddered, and I still have nightmares about it to this day. Due to a mysterious power surge, most of the data on the drive was completely corrupted. I stared at the blank screen, my mind reeling. The events of that night played over and over in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still in the room, watching from the shadows. Every night, as I try to sleep, when the clock strikes 3:00 a.m., I can still feel the chill in the air, the weight of invisible eyes on my back, and the quiet whisper of the girl who is there. My name is Tom. I am the eldest child in the family and have a younger sister. That's 10-year-old Lisa, and we had to stay home alone while our parents went to a company event with their colleagues. Our house was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense forest, and the nearest neighbor was at least a mile away. Lisa and I stayed up late watching movies until around midnight. We had just finished watching an episode of Friends when we
What?
heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen. We exchanged worried glances before I got up, grabbed a baseball bat, and told his sister to follow him. He didn't want to leave me alone in case something was wrong. We cautiously made our way downstairs, where I suddenly stopped, causing Lisa to bump into me. I stood frozen, staring into the kitchen. I peeked around him and saw a tall man, about 6, with a hood covering his face and a flashlight in his hand. Lisa and I panicked with the idea of finding the phone to call the police. Panicking, I grabbed Lisa's hand and dragged him back upstairs to my parents' bedroom, where the house phone was. We locked the door and called 113. I could hear the intruder's footsteps slowly approaching the stairs. Tom stayed on the phone with the police, describing our situation, while I watched the door handle turn slowly. Suddenly, the man began pounding on the door, shouting,
"Let me in! I won't hurt you, I promise."
I shouted back.
Go away! The police are on their way.
The pounding continued, and the door began to shake violently. Lisa looked at me and signaled for us to escape through the window. We opened it quietly and climbed out onto the roof, then carefully made our way down the tree next to the house. We ran into the woods and hid behind a large boulder, our hearts pounding in our chests. Minutes felt like hours as we
Car
waited.
36
We
responding.
heard the distant sound of police sirens, and soon after, saw flashing lights approaching our house. The intruder must have heard them too, because he bolted from the house and disappeared into the forest. We watched as the police arrived, and we ran out to meet them, telling them where the man had gone. The police searched the woods and eventually found the man hiding near an old shed. They arrested him, and we were relieved beyond words. The officers stayed with us until our parents returned home, shocked and grateful that we were safe. A few days later, we learned that the intruder had been wanted for several burglaries in the area. He had a history of violence, and we were lucky to have escaped unharmed. I am now 15, and the memory of that night still haunts me. Tom has since moved out for college, and our family decided to move closer to the city to feel safer.
The intruder in the school. It was a snowy day in December, just 1 or 2 days before the Christmas break, so everyone was getting excited. We weren't really doing any work during the self-study period, so it was just me and a few of my friends sitting and talking in the classroom. But then, my teacher, Miss J, received a message from the principal that a madman had broken into the school with an unidentified weapon intending to harm someone to satisfy his own beastly desires. Although we really did not conduct drills for this kind of situation, even though I was very scared, I quickly turned off the lights, closed the windows, and locked the door. Sitting in the dark waiting, but more than 10 minutes had passed without any alarm. My classroom was very close to the intruder's location, so my every breath was filled with fear and tension, making me break out in a sweat. About 10 minutes after the lockdown, we heard a woman screaming, heavy footsteps near the stairs, and she was singing with a creepy smile.
I'm coming to get you.
At this point, every click she made us barely able to breathe. At least half of the class was crying. She, with her disheveled hair, was approaching the door. The flashlight once again swept across the window, this time slower, as if searching for something. The light stopped at the classroom window, shining straight in. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the light to move away. Luckily, it did. Silence enveloped the classroom. There were no sounds from outside. Inside the class, we sat quietly, not knowing what would happen next. But no. A savage scream. She tried to bang repeatedly on the door with her hands. We were terrified to see her succeed, but dared not scream in utter fear. I nearly screamed. Then she managed to unlock the door from the outside, and now she was in the room, with the widest and most terrifying smile. She exclaimed,
Where are my children?
of course, thanks to my luck. She noticed the pencil I had dropped under the desk near the curtain I was hiding behind. I grabbed the broom and hit her hard. After a struggle with that creepiness, I got scratched and bleeding on my hand. I almost fainted, lying down as if I wanted to pass out. I counted my lucky stars because I was dizzy. I silently prayed that my friends had the courage to fight back against her, and I can say they knocked her down and restrained her. A moment later, my vision blurred with a hulking black shadow in front of me. A shout of policies came as they rushed in and arrested her, and I was taken to the hospital. My friends and teachers were also severely injured, but thankfully, they were okay. We all survived. That was probably the worst Christmas break I've ever experienced in my life. That was probably the worst Christmas holiday I had ever experienced in my life.
Horror story about the rocking chair. My name is Jonathan, and there was a time when I frequently experienced severe sleep disorders. I often woke up in a vegetative state. Every time I lay down to sleep, nightmares would come. It started when I woke up at night feeling trapped in my body. I could see, feel, and hear everything around me, but I couldn't act. Gradually, it became more complex. One night, I woke up and found myself standing near the bed, looking at myself. I can't describe how terrified I was. I decided to see a psychologist. Drive. Beman gave me sedatives and said that over time, it would go away, and I would have to learn how to improve my sleep. I followed his instructions, and within a month, I was quite good. But suddenly, things got worse. Since I had just moved in, I didn't have much furniture. Besides the sofa, there was a TV set, a table lamp, and a rocking chair. It was in the apartment before I moved in. I kept it as an extra seat for myself. One night, I fell asleep on the living room sofa. I woke up feeling trapped, but this time, I saw someone sitting in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth. The feeling of suffocation, like being pinned down, was overwhelming me. The scariest part was knowing I was awake, but also knowing I was seeing something that didn't exist. I saw a woman around 70 years old, and there was no one else in the apartment but me. She didn't face me or make any sound, just rocking back and forth. It must have been my imagination because as soon as I snapped out of that state, the woman disappeared. I went to see my psychologist and talked about it, and he also said it was just a hallucination. I learned to meditate before going to bed because it would help my sleep, and I did it for a few weeks. I felt reassured that I had stopped experiencing these things until one night. That day, I was comfortable and relaxed for the first time in a long time with my friend. My friend Ren stayed over that night. Around 3 a.m., I heard heavy breathing from a very close distance. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw a horrifying face leaning towards me, staring straight into my eyes. Her thin white hair was all over me. It was the woman rocking in the chair. I tried to call out, but my voice was choked. My lips couldn't move. I let out a weak groan that sounded like the moan of a zombie. I wanted to scream. I thought I was dead. My fear also subsided. I gradually became aware of my breathing. The woman then said to me, go away, run away. I gasped, unable to breathe from the shock. She stood up and began to circle around me hungrily. Her jaw started to elongate into a large gaping mouth, then disappeared into the darkness. I jumped up and screamed, startling Ren, who had no idea what was wrong with me. Ren woke up in shock.
What the hell, man? What's going on?
I fainted before I could say anything. Everything felt so real, but no one believed me. The doctors thought I had a panic attack in my sleep due to intoxication. I was kept under special care for a week. After hearing her words, I moved to a new place, but before leaving, I shared my story. I also asked the landlord about the history of the rocking chair. He said that many years ago, this apartment was a healthcare unit for people with mental disorders. She just liked to be alone and rocked the chair day after day. She hated noise and disturbance and passed away right in that chair. After that, I left because of her warnings. That was probably the last time I saw her. Horror Story Red Bracelet. I have worked at the hospital for 10 years, something I am very proud of. Most people I meet here have an average working time of just 1 year. The shortest time someone stayed was 1 week. Working here is not easy. They say staff are cursed if they do something wrong. Lights fall on people's heads, they slip on completely dry floors, and fires frequently break out. Patients sometimes become inexplicably violent. No matter how many times they inspect the building or add security staff, the employees always seem to be targeted by bad luck. Even after many years here, I don't know why, but I don't believe in that. I just try to do my best at work. Since working here, nothing unfortunate has ever happened to me. Sometimes I hear strange noises, but they are insignificant. I've gotten used to it and become resilient. One night after a late shift, I stepped into the elevator and immediately pressed the close button to slowly descend to the lobby from the 11th floor, alone. When it reached the 9th floor, the door opened. Reflexively, I reached out to press the close button but stopped when I saw someone standing there. It was a beautiful young girl I had never seen before, probably a new intern. Something about her made me want to talk and ask about her work. I placed my arm in the door to let her in. I asked if she was new. She shyly nodded without saying anything. I was very happy to get to know her. I saw her name tag. Her name was Ilsa. Every night after that, after my shift, at the same time on the 9th floor, Ilsa would be standing there waiting. This surprised me, but I thought it was just a coincidence. She didn't say anything, just bowed her head shy. For the first time in a long while, I decided to open up and make a new friend. One night, while going down in the elevator, as expected, the door opened on the 9th floor where Ilsa was waiting to get in. I decided to ask if she would like to have a drink with me. As soon as she stepped in, she heard a loud noise at the end of the hallway. Both of us looked out. From the corner of the hallway, a dark figure of a man appeared. He was tall, limping, and heading straight for the elevator.
Wait!
The man called out, "And now." She immediately reached out her hand to hold the door. The man sped up and shouted, "Help me! Help!" As the man got closer, my stomach began to churn. Wait, something wasn't right with me. The man was now just a few steps away from the elevator. He waved at us, revealing a red wristband that was bleeding. I immediately pulled Ilsa back and closed the elevator door. He pounded on the door continuously. I recalled the cold, clinical atmosphere of the morgue. The bodies lay on metal slabs, each with a red wristband. The image of a young girl's lifeless hand, limp from the weight of the wristband, flashed through his mind. His heart pounded, a mix of confusion and fear. The elevator swayed, bringing Jazz back to the present. He looked at Ilsa again. She slowly and coldly said,
Why did you do that? Why didn't you help him?
I replied,
I couldn't help him. He was wearing a red wristband, which is only for the deceased in the morgue.
She didn't speak. Then suddenly, she pressed the button to go down to the warehouse basement. Even I rarely go down there alone. I followed Ilsa down a narrow, dark corridor he hadn't noticed before. The walls were adorned with old, faded photos of patients and staff, all wearing red wristbands. The air grew colder. Then her hand fell down, revealing a red wristband. Her back was covered in numerous torn shirt marks. I froze, wondering what this was. Dizzy, dreaming perhaps. I started screaming loudly, and she gave me a horrifying smile. At that moment, all I could do was run for my life, and she kept slowly following me. When I reached the elevator door, I pressed the button frantically, uncontrollably. But the elevator didn't open. My breathing was so rapid I couldn't control it. I just stood there, eyes closed, praying. I held my breath because she was only a few meters behind me, walking slowly. Without waiting any longer, I had to find the emergency exit to run up to the first floor. I ran like I had never run before. Thank God I escaped that dreadful, terrifying place. I might have stayed there too long. It was probably time to leave. The next day, I quit my job. Years later, after I left, I learned that it had been officially abandoned without any explanation. It was a horrifying and unforgettable experience for me. The story I want to tell next is, it was early June 2017. I was taking a road trip with my 9-year-old son Tony to West Virginia to visit family. It was a long, stressful drive. My car didn't have working AC at the time, and it was an incredibly hot day, so we were a bit stressed out. By the 6-hour mark, we had left later in the day, so we were still on the road by dark. I think it was around 9 o'clock p.m. when we were still on the road, and Tom started complaining that he needed to use the bathroom. There was already tension in the car before this, but his constant complaining brought about a slight argument between the two of us. At last, I saw a blue rest area sign zoom past us on the interstate, so I veered off into the rest area. It had a small building with 2 bathrooms, a couple of vending machines, and a few benches. That was it. There were no other cars parked nearby, besides some big white pickup truck. As I pulled up next to the building, Tom got out in a hurry and ran to the bathroom. I left the car on because I knew he'd be back soon. Like I said, I don't want to get into personal stuff like why we had a bit of an argument, but it seemed we were at that stage where we weren't exchanging words anymore. I figured the rest of the ride would be silent. About a minute later, the back door opened. I wanted to say something to Tom, but I didn't know what to say, so I just stayed quiet and drove off. I noticed that the white pickup truck parked nearby was leaving as well. I veered back onto the interstate and into the left lane, and the pickup truck did the same. I stepped on it a little, and so did he. He started flashing his lights, so I switched to the right lane thinking he was nothing but an aggressive driver. But as soon as I switched to the right, so did he. He was still flashing his lights. I pulled into the right lane and started to slow down. He sped up, still in the middle lane, and when he caught up to me, he slowed down and lowered his window. I did the same,
Hey,
and he started yelling something to me, pointing at my car. He looked like a creepy, sketchy dude at first glance. I couldn't hear a word he was saying, so he pointed for me to pull over to the side. I told Tom to keep calm. In my head, I was saying if this guy tried to do anything funny, I would floor it. The pickup pulled up behind me on the grass, and the guy came out of his truck running to my car. I put the car back in drive as my heart was racing, ready to drive, but then he screamed, "Wait!" He got to my window and said,
that's not your kid, and pointed to the back seat.
He said, "That's not your kid that got in your car." Suddenly, the back right side door opens, and I turned to see someone getting out of my car, not my son Tom. I got out from the car, screaming at the tall person who seemed to be a fully grown man, but they had already disappeared into the woods. I looked at the driver of the pickup and thanked him as I suddenly panicked, thinking about what could have happened to Tom. I got back in my car, crossed the grass between the interstate, and drove back to the rest area. The guy in the pickup followed me. We got back there in like 30 seconds to find Tom waiting outside the rest area bathroom. He got back in the car, all confused. I explained everything to him, almost out of breath, as did the pickup driver. I thanked the guy one more time before he drove back to the spot he was sitting in before. Tom was so intrigued about what just happened, and I was so disturbed that we were back on good terms again. We chatted the whole rest of the way and told family about it as soon as we arrived. I never even got to see what the person who got in my car looked like. Honestly, maybe I should be happy I never turned around to look at them because I don't know what they would have done. Train through time. At a train station, as some people hurriedly catch the last train home. Among them is Leah. As the train departs the station, Leah sits down in her seat, looking out at the city skyline fading into the distance. She feels a strange sense of unease, though she cannot understand why. The rhythm of the train is steady, almost hypnotic, lulling her into a gentle sleep. The soft rumble of the train fills the air as it speeds along the tracks, the city gradually giving way to darkness. Leah is startled awake as the train sways slightly upon entering a long tunnel. Inside, the tunnel is pitch black, and the train's lights flicker momentarily. Leah looks around, noticing that the once crowded train car is now eerily empty. She glances out the window, but instead of seeing the countryside she expected, there is only a vast, empty void, as if the train is traveling through an immense, empty space. As the train exits the tunnel, Leah is shocked to see an entirely different scene outside. The modern city and familiar countryside have vanished, replaced by a mist-covered, ancient village. The buildings are old and crumbling, with thatched roofs and cobblestone streets. The train slows down as it approaches a station that appears to have never been used. The train stops, and the sliding door opens with a faint hiss. Leah hesitates, but the strangeness inside the train compels her to step outside. As she steps onto the platform, the cold, damp air hits her, filled with the smell of earth and decay. The village is deserted, with no signs of life. The only sound is the cawing of crows. The village looks like a snapshot from the past. Tables are set with dust-covered plates, untouched. A child's toy lies abandoned on the street. She realizes that she is no longer in her own time. Perhaps she has traveled back to a long-forgotten era. Suddenly, Leah hears a sound like a train whistle, and panic overwhelms her. She runs back to the platform as the village around her begins to change. The sky darkens at an unusually rapid pace. As soon as she reached the platform, the train began to accelerate, the doors still open. With a desperate leap, Leah grabbed onto the railing and pulled herself inside, collapsing onto the floor of the train car, where she lay, gasping for breath. As the train sped away from the village, Leah slowly stood up and looked out the window. The village was quickly swallowed by the darkness. The train entered another tunnel. She braced herself for whatever might come next.